After battling our way through the first two acts in a state of sleepless delirium, we take a moment to rest our eyes. It is only a moment though, as an army of coked out space frogs jump through a portal to the astral plane and, wait a second, isn't this a medieval fantasy game? We ignore the sudden shift in genre and use our cunning action feature to double dash past their front line and jump headfirst into the portal they've created. We take out the first two Gith we encounter easily enough, and, just as we're at risk of forgetting what game we're playing, we get absolutely fucking trounced by Hold Person. There's the Baldur's Gate 3 I know and love. We reload the save, and all 8 of our intelligence points work together to let us know that we should probably target the caster first, and then take the rest out later. This display of tactical wit impresses our illithid ally, who spends the next 15 minutes monologuing about his tragic backstory. We barely pay attention to it until the end, when he offers us a psychically empowered gummy worm, which, as is tradition with these sorts of runs, we eat in front of him. This action seems to upset him somewhat, but we pay his objections no mind as we're too busy learning how to fly. We return to the material plane and throw a few good berries at Withers before drinking an elixir of bloodlust and immediately living up to the name by slaughtering a group of nearby mercenaries and throwing ourselves off a building to negate the HP that we got back from the long rest we were forced to take at the start of the video. The circus is in town, so we decide to go have a chat with Dribbles the Clown about the importance of ranged attacks, and off his corpse pick up perhaps the most important item to this run. More like Dripples the Clown, am I right, boys? Seeking entry to the city, we come across a military roadblock. A rational man would simply pay the toll and enter, however, since we've spec'd our build so heavily into stealth, we have another option. That, of course, being attempting to massacre 10 armed guards in broad daylight. We are able to take a few down from the safety of a nearby rooftop before the 20 dexterity gigabehemoth accompanying them jumps up with us and hits us with the classic go-go gadget rectal probe before throwing us in prison. We wake up inside, with our armor still on, to the comforting sound of our skeletal cellmate challenging us to a game of riddles. We solve his riddles using the powers of wit, cunning, and asking my mother, and as a reward he opens the gate for us. Fortunately, they keep the weapons about 10 feet away from the psychotic fugitives, so it isn't long before we're back to doing what we do best: abusing the detection mechanic. As we leave the prison, we run into another blockade, and, with our previous encounter still fresh in our mind, we decide to try diplomacy this time. We end up rolling a natural 20 to convince the Secret Service that the psychopath in clown makeup, who not 5 minutes ago was sent to prison for murdering 4 guards, has had a change of heart and decided to break themselves out with the sole purpose of bodyguarding one of the most important politicians in the city. You know, a few weeks ago I would have said that this level of incompetence was somewhat unrealistic, but it seems art really does imitate life. We walk across the bridge and begin seizing up as Scleritus finally decides to tell us about our past. Turns out we're a child of Baal. Who would have guessed? This knowledge propels us to level 10, and we take our first level of fighter. Since we can't rest to regain uses of any features, the passive fighting styles from fighter is really the best we're going to do here. The plot refuses to slow down as we snap back to reality only to find Lord Gortash inviting us upstairs for a chat. We accept, and he immediately starts making a lot of sense. We agree to team up with him to reclaim our birthright from Orin the Usurper, and he immediately starts proving his usefulness. He lets us know that a shape-shifting assassin has infiltrated our camp, and, seeing as we only have 2 companions, Halsin and Jaheira, a random guess would give us a 50% chance of getting rid of them. 2 random guesses, on the other hand, would guarantee it. With Orin's assassins dealt with for now, we decide to enter the lower city. This counts as changing areas, which for some reason prompts the game to restore our hit points. That doesn't really feel like it's in the spirit of the challenge, so we throw ourselves off a building to reset them. We're going to be doing this a few times throughout the video, and we never get it exactly right, but it's usually close enough. As we're standing up, we notice a nearby magic shop and greedily head inside before remembering that we have no money. Oh well, since we're here, we may as well assassinate the shop's owner, Leroican, a wizard who is way too cocky for somebody who can only cast 6th level spells. We get absolutely cooked by his legendary action before reloading the fight and applying just the smallest amount of brain power possible to it and killing the Myrmidons before we go after Leroican. Turns out, without an unmissable reaction that can one-hit you, he's actually a complete pushover. We let our inner loot goblin run wild and take all of his things before selling them to his hologram downstairs. Ultimately, we don't get too much gold out of this, but the image was too amusing for me not to include it in the video. With our good deed done for the day, we decide to head back to the tavern that the Emperor pointed out on the way into town, and not long after arriving, the cook tasks us with killing a group of rats that have gathered in the basement. Not wanting to suffer the humiliation of killing a god and then dying to a pack of rodents, we bust out a 6th level spell scroll to take them out for us. All I'm saying is, we didn't have to use any consumables against Lorokin. I'll note that, while we did technically deal with the rat problem, a sea of festering necrotic corpses right next to where they keep all the food might be more of a Pyrrhic victory in the cook's eyes, so, to make things right, we delve deeper into the basement and deal with the frog infestation that they had going on free of charge. With the gift dealt with, we stumble upon the Emperor's old living quarters, and, like a true D&D player, ignore our allies' attempt at backstory exposition and characterization in favor of stealing all their shit and pursuing our own backstory exposition and characterization. We of course do this by heading down into the sewers and catching our demigod half-sister, Orin, LARPing as a 6-year-old before telling us to kill our ally Gortash and challenging us to a duel in the House of Ball. We point out that we'd be happy to kill her right here, but before we can make that point, she bamfs away. We half-heartedly give chase until a group of assassins cut us off. Turns out, hanging out in a sewer all day, circle-jerking about who can better worship one of the dumbest gods in existence doesn't do wonders for your constitution, and we kill them all in one round. Somewhat irritated by the multiple attempts on our life, we decide to troll Orin and the gang by heading back up to the surface and solving all of the murders that she and her group of edgelords have been orchestrating for the past couple of weeks. If we're serious about taking down this gang of degenerates, the first thing we need to do is think like a degenerate ourselves, so it's off to the brothel. Among the normal clientele, we find two very interesting people. The first being Raphael, an extremely powerful devil who offers to make all of our problems go away in exchange for a magical artifact that we don't want, can't use, and don't even own. The other being Nisha, a pretty wood elf who insists that she'd love us even if we were a worm. I think I speak for everybody here when I say, go fuck yourself, Raphael. Nisha's Embrace grants us the Rapture buff. This allows us to add a d6 to every attack roll, ability check, and saving throw that we make until our next long rest. For those of you who aren't using this video as a sleep aid, you'll note that we aren't long resting for the entirety of the act, so this is a huge buff. For those of you that are using this video as a sleep aid, nightmare, 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 nightmare! Oh, that's fucked up. With our body rejuvenated and our mind cleansed of degeneracy, we re-enter the city and immediately throw ourselves off a rooftop in order to—
You've taken a wrong turn, friend.
Who the fuck are you? Anyway, it turns out the sharpshooter feat is really good when you have an average of plus 17 to hit on all your attacks. After overcoming that slight detour, we're back on track, thwarting the ballists. It isn't long before we find this hack trying to kill somebody with poisoned wine instead of crossbow bolts. We point this out in an attempt to piss him off, which I must say works wonderfully, as he and all of his allies begin pelting us with chemical weapons. We kill them all and go back to loot their corpses in an attempt to get some of that poison for ourselves, and instead stumble upon a map to the ballist lair. We follow the map without too much trouble and eventually find ourselves at the door, guarded by 3 dipshits who can't make one ranged attack between them. I know I've harped on this in the past, but I'm going to do so again for posterity. I do not care how much damage you can do in melee. If the best thing you can do at range is spit on me, you are not winning that fight. Give me a second while I pull out my checklist here. Let's see. Got it. Did it in the last video. Yeah. Oh, how could I forget that? Now inside the sanctum, fellow Ballspawn Saravok tells us our backstory yet again, and offers us a way to re-ingratiate ourselves with Ball. Seeing the sorry state in which our successor Orin has left things, we decide to take him up on that. Now in possession of perhaps the edgiest title in the game, we make our way back into the main foyer of the sanctum and notice there's a new vendor waiting for us. He has on him all sorts of interesting items, but the one that really catches our eye is the ballist armor. It emits a 3-meter aura that makes all enemies inside vulnerable to piercing damage, which just so happens to be the type of damage that most crossbows deal. The only problem is that this vendor seems to have realized that which most ballists don't. Running around committing random acts of murder isn't actually a very profitable endeavor. To remedy this situation, they have opted to price gouge the ever-living fuck out of us and charge us 6,000 gold pieces for a bit of leather. Now, under normal circumstances, I'd tell this guy to shove his deal up his ass. Unfortunately, though, I've been doing some number crunching in the background, and it doesn't look like we have enough DPR to kill the Elder Brain in time without this armor, so we're gonna have to suck it up and scrounge together some gold. The first place we decide to look is this castle that's just suspiciously placed in the middle of the city. I mean, surely somebody rich lives here, right? We, talk our way past the guards at the door and head into the main living area before being attacked by what I can only imagine to be the standard company kept by billionaires that live in castles. Mindless savages and disease-infested animals. We put them down without issue and make our way into the castle basement, where we find what I imagine to be another staple of billionaire accommodations. That is, of course, cells full of starving people. Even deeper down, we find the lord of the castle himself, Cazador Zar. He seems to be caught up in some sort of ritual, so we take this opportunity to introduce a little bit of mechanical skill into Baldur's Gate 3. It's spam clicking. We just spam click the shit out of him from stealth. On his person and throughout the rest of his castle, we do find a few items of value worth looting, but not enough to get us to our monetary goal. Unfortunately, it seems like he had most of his assets tied up in cryptocurrency. Since robbing a castle didn't work, we set our sights on the next most likely place to be hoarding wealth: a church. When we arrive, we learn that the church also doubles as a kind of therapist's office, which is good, because if you hadn't noticed, our character is kind of a fucking lunatic, as demonstrated by the fact that we murder all of the attendants. We're proven an accidental hero once more, however, as it turns out the church was secretly a front for a group of Shar worshippers. We descend into the basement and kick off the boss fight. The gimmick here is that they spam darkness all over the place and it's almost impossible to hit them, which is kind of ironic because we kill everyone, including the final boss, without taking a point of damage. Finally, after combining all the funds we could find in an eternal vampire billionaire's castle with the sum of all the material wealth of a literal god, we finally have enough money to buy ourselves a nice new tunic. With everything else falling into place, it's time to head back down into the sewers and give Orin the duel we promised her. We knock down a wall by shooting arrows at it, don't think about it too hard, before making our way to the Ballast door. Knock knock. Who's there? Orin. Orin who? Exactly. The big man himself shows up and, seeing the outcome of our duel, offers us the power of his divine lineage. At this point, we're kind of in too deep, so we graciously accept. We loot all of Orin's shit, take her netherstone, and head back to meet up with Gortash. Gortash is happy to see us because it means his plan is succeeding. No other reason. And we make arrangements to meet by an underground boat where he claims to keep the Netherbrain. We sail across the murky waters and take out a rather pathetic last line of defense, consisting of a few intellect devourers, before we meet up with Gortash and attempt to dominate the brain. He gets cooked almost instantly, but we pick up the stones and hit that fatty natty 20, and I am so sorry for uttering that phrase. I was sorry as I was saying it. You'll be happy to know, though, that I did see justice retroactively, as my character decides to fucking throw himself off a cliff and swim around in the astral plane for all of eternity. So you get what you deserve one way or another. We do run it back, though, and eventually we do make it past what appears to be the final boss of this playthrough, which is apparently, you know, jumping registration. I'm not sure what that's called in a technical term. Anyway, we get out of the prism. We use a potion of invisibility combined with our triple dash to make it past the preliminary encounters and up to the Netherbrain itself. We say one last prayer to Baal before grabbing onto the brainstem. It is advisable to take out the 4 mind flayers guarding the portal before having the Emperor channel the stones, but our build isn't really designed for fair fights, let alone fighting 4 illithids and a dragon on top of a Netherbrain in broad daylight, so we use invisibility to squeak our way by this one. The Emperor gets the portal open and heads inside, and we're quick to follow. However, in my reckless bloodlust, I forgot that opportunity attacks exist, and also forgot that mind flayers can stun you when they hit you with a melee attack. Yeah, I wish I had my live reaction for this one. I was not happy with myself. One turn later, and we do make it inside. It's time to put our plan into action. Due to the way the mind break condition works, we're not able to take advantage of our multitude of attacks. We're pretty much constricted to 1 per action. Our plan here is to get as close to the brain as we can, turn on Aura of Murder, and just hit it as hard as possible with one attack. Our first attack crits, so we're off to a good start, and we're able to use our one and only action surge from taking levels in Fighter to hit it again on the first turn. We end things in kind of a pickle, standing right next to the brain on a platform that's about to be negated. Fortunately, the Emperor is packing the telekinesis spell, so he's able to pull us out. On turn 3, it uses its legendary action to grant itself immunity to piercing damage, while we spend the turn repositioning ourselves with the help of the telekinesis spell. Turn 4 rolls around and its Aegis drops, which is our cue to shove our crossbow up its medulla for another heap of damage. This damage isn't enough to kill it, and normally we would be cooked as it's going to grant itself immunity to piercing damage for the final turn. However, we've got one last trick up our sleeve, and that trick is the Nearmisser crossbow. We've been wielding it this whole time, but never shooting it because it isn't good with our Aura of Murder. However, what it is good at is not dealing piercing damage, which the Netherbrain happens to be immune to at the moment. So, we fire up our bonus action, put 2 force bolts into it, and bring the longest day of adventuring ever to a close. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.